We are joined today by Representative Robert Freeman. You've proposed a bill that would create what you have referred to as a fairer property tax system. Why do you think the system is not fair currently?
Well, one of the problems with property taxes in general is they're not based on the ability to pay. It's the assessed value of your property that results in your tax bill for your residents. And what I'm proposing is to introduce an amendment to the state constitution that would allow for the General Assembly to create property tax circuit breakers. And they work in the same concept as an electric circuit breaker. If your taxes go too high and they overload, it would cut it at a certain point. Basically, it would establish that property taxes could not exceed a certain set percentage of household income, and to keep it fair, to ensure that people of lesser means are able to meet their property tax obligation without being overly burdened.
What is causing this increase in property taxes currently?
Well, our local governments, particularly our school districts, are very reliant on the property tax as a form of funding. And it's a very reliable stream of funding because it's based on the assessed value of property. But again, it does not necessarily reflect the ability to pay of the household. It can be particularly burdensome to senior citizens who are retired and on a fixed income, or to people who are going through a period of economic layoff in their jobs and are still required to meet their tax obligations, but are now on a limited income because of the layoff. So by having a circuit breaker, you would be able to more clearly reflect the ability to pay and build in a safeguard by making sure that the property tax liability would not exceed a certain set percentage of the household income.
In Pennsylvania, where does the money collected for property tax go to?
It goes towards local government activities. The largest portion goes to our school districts. We fund a tremendous amount of our school obligations through property taxes, and that's been an ongoing controversy and issue of concern. The state has increased funding for education, but it's not able to keep pace with the demands of the need. So that results in a lot of the obligation falling to the local property tax level. Property taxes are also paid to your local municipality, your township, borough, or city, and also to your county. Your county levies a property tax for its financial obligations as well.
Under this bill, now that there would be a decrease in property taxes, what would be done to make up for the lost money that this bill would have kept from going towards property taxes?
Well, that's one of the things that will have to be worked out in the enabling legislation. My bill 816, House Bill 816, merely amends the Constitution to allow for property tax circuit breakers. The actual enabling legislation will be worked out by the legislature in terms of how it would function. There's roughly 17 states in the District of Columbia that have some form of a property tax circuit breaker. We here in Pennsylvania have the property tax rent rebate, which helps senior citizens on limited income. But this would go further in that it would include other economic categories, such as people of any income, to ensure that their property taxes would not exceed a set percentage of their household income. In terms of where the funding makeup could come from, it could be done as in some states do, with the state providing a rebate, where the property tax owner might pay their property tax bill, but they would get a rebate on the amount that exceeds the set percentage that it's supposed to be limited to. Or a tax credit system. That's done in some of those states as well, where you get a tax credit against your liability.
Besides less taxes, what benefit would the people of Pennsylvania see under this amendment?
Well, by building fairness into the property tax system and making sure that it doesn't become overly burdensome in terms of the overall percentage of household income, you would make housing somewhat more affordable, for one. You would relieve a tremendous amount of economic pressure on families that are struggling to meet their property tax bills, and you'd build in fairness as well. If you look at the figures, low-income families that make up roughly 20% of the families in Pennsylvania pay a higher percentage of their income to property taxes than do the wealthiest people. Low-income families pay about 4.6% of their total household income, whereas the wealthiest 1% pay about 1.6%. in terms of their property tax obligation. So building fairness into the system with something like a property tax circuit breaker will be less burdensome to more families and hopefully make housing more affordable, stabilize neighborhoods and communities that suffer from high tax burden. It's particularly onerous in terms of those communities, and this we'll get into our next issue to talk about, that have high tax exempt properties within their borders. That limits the base of a community, which means it's tougher to get revenue, which pushes the tax burden onto those taxpayers who live in the community, as opposed to a tax exempt property, such as a major university or a hospital that's nonprofit that doesn't pay real estate taxes. In trying to make sure that there is fairness towards low and middle income families, I think the property tax circuit breaker can be a great advantage to local taxing.
As we've been saying, this would be an amendment to the state constitution. For people who may not be familiar with that process, can you walk us through what that looks like?
Sure. One of the reasons I'm proposing this is that we have a provision in our state constitution that goes way back to at least the State Constitutional Convention of '68, but may have gone back further, which provides for the uniformity of all taxes in Pennsylvania. And while on its face that sounds fair, it can be terribly burdensome to lower middle income folks compared to the wealthy. We have a flat income tax as opposed to a progressive income tax in Pennsylvania. That shifts most of the burden onto low and middle income families as opposed to those of wealthier means. But in order to allow for the property tax circuit breaker to build a fairer property tax system, you would have to amend the state constitution. And that's what my bill, House Bill 816, would do. To amend the state constitution, you have to pass the amendment in 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature. And then after it passes those 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature, it would go before the voters for a referendum, and they would have the final say whether to approve or disapprove the proposed amendment.
Was there a specific situation that inspired you to propose this bill?
Well, there's been a concern within my district, and I think a lot of districts across Pennsylvania, that property taxes are somewhat burdensome, that particularly the school property tax tends to be rather high for a lot of folks to have to comply with. And it was my feeling that by promoting a property tax circuit breaker, we could build fairness into the system, make sure it reflects more the ability to pay. It's interesting to note that, again, people of lesser income, lower and middle income people, pay a higher percentage of their income to property taxes than do the wealthiest element, because it's not based on the ability to pay. So that was the reasoning for the proposal.
Where is this bill in the legislative process currently?
It's been introduced as House Bill 816, and it's been referred to the committee that I chair, the House Local Government Committee. We will have to hold a hearing on it as required for any constitutional amendment proposal, but we're hoping to bring it up possibly sometime in April, if at all possible.
You touched on this a little bit a few minutes ago, but you brought up you do have a similar bill about compensating municipalities for tax-exempt properties. Can you talk about what a tax-exempt property is?
Sure. In Pennsylvania, there are a number of categories of property that are tax exempt from local property taxes. A non-for-profit medical facility or hospital, a university or college, government buildings like a county government center or county courthouse would all be tax exempt. And these are all important institutions and are major institutions that provide jobs and important services to a region or a community. But the reality is that they don't pay property tax. And as a result, the host municipality where they are located does not receive revenue in the forms of property tax for these properties. That reduces their tax base, which means that you shift the tax burden in these host municipalities more onto the local residents and local businesses, which can be somewhat burdensome. My proposal would be to exempt or to compensate those communities that have a high percentage of tax exempt properties within their borders by creating a tax exempt property municipal assistance fund. And what that would do is it would take the 18% liquor tax revenues that's levied on every sale of wine and spirits in the state. That currently generates about 460 million a year. To take that and to put it into a tax-exempt property municipal assistance fund that would then drive it out to communities with high percentages of tax-exempt. They would have to have at least 15% or more of their total property assessed value as being tax exempt in order to qualify. And the income would have to be of the community would have to be roughly 100, or not to exceed rather, 115% of the median income of the state. To ensure that it's going into the communities that are most in need of this kind of relief. Under the proposal, no more than 10% of the funds can go to any one municipality. So all the money won't be sent to, say, Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. It'll be distributed more evenly throughout the Commonwealth. And it would be sent out to each municipality based on a $100 per capita basis to provide the funding. It's interesting to note that there are a number of communities that have very high tax exempt properties within their borders. And some of them fall into the Act 47 Municipal Distress Municipality Program, I believe in large part because they have such a tremendous amount of tax exempt properties, which limits their tax base, which in turn limits their ability to provide essential services at the municipal level. And this would deal solely with municipal property taxes, which are exempt. For instance, in the town of Johnstown, 60% of the total assessed value of property is tax exempt. In the college town of Clarion in Clarion County, 80% of the total assessed value of property is tax exempt. And in Harrisburg, some 59% of the property is tax exempt. I believe Scranton in the Northeast has about 56% of its total assessed value as property as tax exempt. And if you look at all Act 47 distressed municipalities, that program which tries to get those communities back on their feet and stable again, anywhere from 25% to roughly 60% of the total assessed value is tax exempt. So it's no wonder some communities fail when they don't have the resources from their property tax, which is the major source of revenue for municipalities in Pennsylvania.
You talked about how municipalities can be qualified for this funding, but how will the amount of money be determined that they get?
Well, there's a formula in the bill that drives it out. And it creates, in essence, a sort of revenue sharing program using the $460 million generated by the 18% liquor tax that's levied again on wine and spirits. It would then drive it out based upon the factors I mentioned. You have to have at least 15% or more of your total assessed value of property as tax exempt. That becomes the tipping point as to whether tax exempt properties are presenting a burden to your local tax base. And then they have to have a household median income of about 115% or less. That would be 115% or less of the median household income. Again, driving it to those communities that are most in need. And again, no single municipality could get more than 10% of the total fund to ensure that it's distributed evenly across the Commonwealth, or at least ensuring that all communities that have 15% or more of their tax exempt base will be compensated for that.
What does the liquor tax currently go to? And if this bill were to be in place, is that going to suffer with the municipalities now using this money?
Well, it's interesting to note that liquor tax was originally instituted back in 1936 to raise money to compensate the victims of the Johnstown flood in Johnstown. But long after the money was used for that purpose, the tax remained in existence. And so you had a situation where the revenue was coming into the state, was no longer used for relief for the Johnstown flood, and it's been going to the general fund. It would obviously be dedicated to the tax-exempt property municipal assistance fund that I envision in my legislation. So it would take it from the general fund. But in the last year's budget, we had a very good balance, a good surplus in which to be able to shift money. It might be a bit tighter this year, but I still think it's a doable range to be able to shift that money, or at the very least, a portion of it into the tax exempt property municipal assistance fund to provide the relief that these high tax exempt communities are facing.
What do the municipalities spend money on that municipalities with a large amount of tax exempt properties can't afford to do right now?
Well, all municipalities provide general municipal services, everything from fire protection to police, code enforcement, various other things dealing with housing in some cases, and economic development efforts to enhance the economic base of the community, as well as other programs that benefit the community at large. For those who have a limited tax base because of a high percentage of tax exempt properties being present in their border, it becomes tough to meet your obligations to provide essential services. You might have to cut back considerably. Think of a town like Clarion, where 80% of the total assessed value of property is tax exempt. How do you meet those municipal obligations with that shrunken of the tax base? And I know Gettysburg also has a high percentage of its assessed value as tax exempt. And we held a hearing on the bill several sessions ago when I first introduced it. And the mayor of Gettysburg at that time pointed out that because of the battlefield, the National Cemetery, their hospital, the county seat, Gettysburg College, they had an extremely limited tax base. And that shifted the burden to those residents that were paying the taxes. It made their taxes higher. The mayor of Gettysburg, who lived in a modest home within the borough, was actually paying more in real estate taxes than the Walmart located in the township outside of Gettysburg because their millage rate was lower. So again, you can see the unfairness of the system when you have a high tax exempt percentage.
What have your colleagues in the House said about this bill?
I've gotten a good response. Many legislators from high tax exempt communities, such as Harrisburg and Johnstown, I think recognize the benefit to it. Gettysburg is another case in point that recognizes the benefit of it. And it's been supported by the Boroughs Association in particular. They've been a strong advocate for the bill and the concept.
Where is this legislation currently?
We are just refining the draft. We made a few adjustments to last year's version, adding the fact that incomes in the communities that are going to benefit from it have to be at 115% or would not exceed 115% of median, or could exceed 115% of median income, but that would be the starting point as a way of ensuring that it goes to the most needy of communities. So that draft is hopefully coming back to us from the Legislative Reference Bureau, which drafts all legislation. And we anticipate introducing it, hopefully, if not this week, next week as a possibility.
On March 11th, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that Mayor Sherrell Parker is calling on the city's hospitals and colleges to help put money towards closing the gap in the city's budget. With a city as large as Philadelphia, do you think that this would make a difference at all?
Oh, it would help Philadelphia. They have a high tax exempt burden as well. Last time I looked at the figure, I think it was about 36%. And so that's a community that would benefit, obviously, by being compensated. But again, with that 10% requirement, we're making sure that the other communities in the Commonwealth get their fair share as well, so that no one gets more than 10% of the fund. Yeah, one of the things that has come up is that some people point to why not use pilots, payments in lieu of taxes. And some communities do have pilots, but they're very difficult to negotiate. Many tax-exempt entities don't see it as part of their mission, whether they're a hospital or whether they're a university, and so they are often resistant to paying pilots. In our legislation, if a community was receiving a pilot, that pilot amount would be deducted from what they would receive from the fund because they're getting some measure of compensation. But there are very limited communities that have pilots because they're tough to negotiate and tough to guarantee as a reliable source of revenue year in and year out.
What are property tax reassessments and why do municipalities use them?
Well, one of the issues that has not been dealt with as effectively as it should be is the reassessment of property on a regular basis. Reassessing property at a regular basis ensures that the tax is based on what the actual value of the property is, which can change over time. Some communities are reluctant to do that because when you reassess, there are people who are afraid their taxes will go up. That's not necessarily the case. Oftentimes, a third see a slight rise in their taxes. Most see the tax level stay the same after they've been reassessed and adjusted, and some actually see a reduction based on reassessment. But reassessment is a way to guarantee a fair reflection of what the property tax should be based on the assessed value of the property. Over time, if you don't reassess, and some communities have not reassessed, 40 or 50 years, it skews the system, and you're levying taxes based upon an old assessment, which might not be an accurate picture of what the assessed value of a property is.
How would your two bills that we discussed today address property tax reassessment?
Well, they don't deal with that issue specifically. That would take a separate piece of legislation. And there's been work done by the local government commission to address reassessment and to try and get some attention to that in the form of another bill. My two bills deal with trying to provide greater fairness in terms of the property tax system. The property tax circuit breaker, making sure property taxes don't exceed a set percentage of household income, and the tax exempt property municipal assistance fund, compensating those communities that have a high percentage of tax exempt properties in their boundaries, which causes them to have a very shrunken real estate base in which to provide essential services. So this is a way to compensate them and make sure those services can be carried out fully, as well as making sure that there's fairness into how the property tax is levied.
Representative Robert Freeman, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.